The Body Confidence Talk Show with Denise Cardenas. Welcome to the Body Confidence Talk Show. I am so excited to have a very special guest with me, Dr. Janiel Henry. Welcome, Janiel. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you so much, Denise. I'm so excited to be here and with your audience so we could talk about this important topic. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, of course. You were the first person I thought of. But before we continue, I want to introduce you.
Okay.
Dr. Janiel Henry is the CEO and founder and licensed psychologist at the Women Rights Psychological and Wellness Centers, which that's where she's at right now, her beautiful office. It's located in Southern California. So if you are in the area, definitely stop by. I've been there and it's amazing. Okay, the Women Rights
Thank you,
is a
Denise.
boutique integrated wellness center specialized in women's mental health, wellness across the lifespan. So I wanted to make sure I emphasize that because when I first met you, Janelle,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, we met at this coffee shop and it was an amazing location, first of all. And I just remember you telling me about your journey and like when you were just getting started with the center,
I can't
right?
believe it.
Yes,
It's wild.
it's wild. Yes. And when I heard you say why you started it, I just felt like you really wanted to empower women and really
Yes.
educate them in their wellness. I feel like this is
Yes.
something that so many of us are not educated, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So share with our audience, why is wellness, self-care, all these wonderful things. Maybe you're better at explaining this. Like, why is it so important to focus on this as women? I know men too, but why do you think this is so important?
Yes. Thank you, Denise. And I really appreciate just your openness and willingness to dive into wellness. And that's such a great question. And one of the reasons why I feel like it's so important, especially for women, is because oftentimes in our culture and society, from like a very young age, we get the message that we need to be doing everything for others.
Mhm.
And even if we love and care about our loved ones and those that are in our lives, sometimes we do that at the expense of our own health and wellness. And so along the journey, we lose connection with what we need, right? And creating space for us to be able to recharge, restore, and nurture ourselves so that we can actually be there in the way that we want to and show up in our lives and support others in the way that we want to so that we could really thrive, right? Moving from that survival mindset to the actually thriving mindset, which is different, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like as women, since little girls, we're always conditioned like we're there for others. Like,
Yes.
I know I've seen that with my mom, especially my mom. I see it in my sister, and it's just like a constant
Yes.
thing. And we think we're selfish. Why do you think like we were so conditioned this way?
Yes, such a great question. And there's so many different layers to it, right?
Mm,
When I think about traditional gender roles and just historically, like when I think about the sociopolitical movements and the feminist movement,
mm,
right? It's like these messages, regardless if we agree with them or not, they're all around us and
mhm.
we internalize them, right?
Yeah.
It's like I'm
Mm,
in the environment, right? Even I think about like, for example, with air quality, right? When I'm breathing, I can do my best to like be mindful and like go to areas that have clean air, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to be also impacted by my environment.
right.
And so for all of us, like we consistently see these messages reflected in the media. And then you mentioned your sister, your mother, right? For our families, our cultures, right?
Mhm.
It's like taught down and passed down from generation to generation. And then it becomes like our only way of thinking about how it could be, right?
Right.
And in some instances, it's been about survival, right? I didn't have an option to take care of myself. Taking care of myself meant that like my family would be negatively impacted or my life would be negatively impacted, right? And so
Mm.
it's so multidimensional, which is why it's so important to really reevaluate that now for ourselves, especially in 2023.
Yeah, that's such a great point that you mentioned. It is survival for a lot of us, like
Yeah.
that's all we can do because whatever our situation is, right?
Yes.
So let's kind of step back. Like I know we talked about this before, but like why was this your mission, like to educate women? Like
Mhm.
where did this come from really, like for you to be like, this is my calling?
Oh, absolutely. So both personally and professionally, this I want to answer that question. So
Mhm.
first, personally, and I've shared this with other audiences that I've spoken with in my family, like looking back, my great grandmother, she actually died probably, it was like, she must have been about 47. I believe it was 47.
Wow, she was
Um,
young.
very young, very young. And in oral history in our family, it was because she worked herself too hard.
Wow.
And in oral history, like she worked herself to death essentially.
Hmm.
So unfortunately, I never had a chance to meet her. But I also know that my grandmother, she died older, but also younger. And a part of that was like cardiac arrest as well. And so, in a personal way, in my family and in our family's history, like this is a part of the story, right? Like
Hmm.
working really hard, being really stressed, and not having the space to be able to take care of oneself or for that to be reinforced, right?
Hmm.
And then professionally, you share a little bit about my background as a psychologist. I've worked in mental health for so many years, over 20 years, and therapy, talk therapy, being able to have that space and create that space is so important. But there was a piece that was missing, right?
Hmm.
This integration with all the other aspects that also contribute to our wellness. Our mental and emotional health is so important and it correlates with everything else.
Hmm.
And there's these other avenues as well that I saw in the field weren't being integrated in the sense of working together, being able to support women from an angle that essentially was one stop shop
Hmm.
that worked for people. Because oftentimes with our schedules, especially as women, we're doing so much. I would make referrals and say, hey, you should visit this nutritionist. And then I would follow up, and someone would say, hey, like I didn't get a chance to go, or I don't really know, like it's far, my schedule. And so I really
Right.
wanted to work to create a space that was a one stop shop as well.
I love that integration. You're so right because we can have sessions, we can, talk it through what we're going through, but it's more than that, right? Like in order to
Yes.
really have that change within ourselves, we have to take those steps. And that's something I personally had to learn. You know, I was
Yes.
I was like, "Oh yes, I want
All of
to
us,
change."
right?
Yeah, I want to change, like, I want to be the better version of myself. I would listen to things, I would have sessions, and things like that and talk it out. I was like, yes, yes, it's really hitting home. But once you go back to your normal environment, it's like you just go back to you're back to your normal self like you were, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And you hit it on the head because it's so much easier said than done, right? I
Yes.
can know I want to be a better version of myself, but how do I actually put that into practice, right?
Mhm.
Where can I get support to work on that area of my life? Because it all impacts the other, the mind, the body,
Mhm.
um, all of those aspects.
Yeah, and a lot that's why I feel like a lot of people don't do it because it is a big change. Like you have to be like mentally, emotionally, like physically prepared for the changes. And that's something that I know I embarked in. Like someone like that is going into this, is listening maybe to this conversation. Like what would you
Mhm.
recommend them to take what's the first step to their wellness?
Yes, excellent. So, one of the things that we love to suggest is starting with identifying your why, right?
Mm, mhm.
You're wanting to thrive, you're wanting to be more well, you're wanting to improve and elevate your wellness. But what's your why for doing it? What do you actually want, right? Is it
Mhm.
having more energy to spend time with your children? Is it being able to live in your purpose more boldly? right? Is it being able to feel stronger in your body, right? So
Mhm.
that you can do the thing that is most valuable to you. So you want to stop, maybe if you're somebody that likes to write, journaling, a little activity to journal, or even just taking time to reflect, and writing down can help us, right? But
Mhm.
taking time to reflect and say, okay, what is my actual why for doing this? Is it because I think I have to,
Right, right.
you know? Or what am I going to gain from this? Because
Mhm.
when we're wanting to implement change, we're looking at like the benefits and the cost, right? It may be uncomfortable, but really tapping into what the goal is and defining that is going to be such a helpful starting point for anyone, wherever you are on your
Wherever,
path.
yeah, I love that you said that. Like, honestly, I wasn't even expecting you going into your why. So that was like, oh, yeah, going into your why. That's an obvious one. And it's so interesting because when I first started in this journey,
Yeah.
I started because I wanted to create a business, a successful business.
Yes.
And, so I started working with someone and, they kept on going back to, hey, focus on yourself, like your inner work, focus on, self-care. Started doing, I'm like, what does that have to do with my business? Like, excuse me, like,
Yes.
this is not why I hired you. Like, and it's so funny, like how that all happened. And it's so true. Like
Yes.
it all comes together. It all comes together. So my why was my business at first. I wanted to create a successful
Yes.
business, work from home. I have a daughter, so I wanted to be more hands-on. As
Yeah.
she was getting older. So that was always my why. So I wanted to share that because it doesn't have to be right away about yourself because I feel like it
Yeah.
just guided me there somehow.
Yes. Yes. Right.
Right? Because like you mentioned, like it's like, why am I doing this? Like if that was me, it's just like, why is this important? Why do I have to focus on me?
Exactly. Right. Right. It's so true.
Yeah, so there's so many different situations. I feel like it's not just one right answer. I feel like it's just all depends on your situation. And it could be the
Yes.
smallest little things that you can do for yourself, right? That can make such a big difference.
Yes. Yes. I was just speaking with a client not too long ago, and we were talking about how hard it is to stay in the present. And so, even
Yes.
for 5 minutes, right, doing a
Hmm.
mindfulness or meditation
Totally.
for 5 minutes. And so, you know what? We started with like, okay, let's just have a goal of 1 minute a day.
Hmm.
It sounds maybe micro or small to others, but depending on where you are, it's a practice, it's a muscle. You build it and you got to start somewhere.
He really is. So let's talk about staying in the present. I feel like such a great topic because I feel like this is
Yeah.
something we all struggle. I know I do. It's just
Yes.
so what is really being in the present? Like, what is that like? Is there like a definition to it? Or-
Yes, yes. So there's a lot of different practices and definitions, like specifically about mindfulness.
Mhm.
But one of my favorite is by John Kabat-Zinn that talks about like paying attention on purpose, right? Like I
Mhm.
love that essential part of
Mhm.
the definition because it allows us to really focus on not just like what's happening in the future, but really allowing ourselves to focus on like the present moment, right? And
Mhm.
so a good question to ask is where is my mind right now?
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
Um, what am I thinking about? Am I thinking about tomorrow, what I have to do? Or am I allowing myself to really experience, you know, sitting on the chair, right? Taking a walk? Am I engaged with my five senses, right? What do I hear along my walk? Being in the present moment. I'm not in the past. I'm not in the future. I'm specifically open to and fully engaged mentally, heart, soul in what's happening right now.
And what does that do to us like when we're like that, like in that moment?
Oh man, so many benefits, right? I feel like we hear it everywhere. Mindfulness, mindfulness, right?
Right, right. But it's like I feel like not a lot of people like really elaborate of like what
Yes,
is mindfulness really? Like
yes,
what will that do for you? Because I feel like it's now becoming like the trend, right? Like is the new
yes,
trend now, like be mindful, but what does that really mean? Like what is the benefits to us if we
yes,
embark on that? Because it's not an easy practice because there's so much
No.
scatter all over us, right? Work,
Yes.
kids, so many things at once. So I feel like, myself, I had to be convinced
Yes. Yes.
of why it was so important for me.
Right? Why put this into practice,
Like,
right?
why? I have so many other things. Why am I going to add
Yeah.
one more thing to it?
Yes. Yeah. And it is so hard, right? Like we have so much
Mhm.
on our plate. I love what you
Yeah.
said because that's the reality, right? Even
Yeah.
for myself, it's like, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I might be really busy. But
Mm.
at the same time, like being in the moment and really slowing down, like you said, it's such a practice and it has to be intentional, right?
Right. And I'm always on the
Um,
go, go, go. So I feel like living in a city, it's a whole different thing, right? Because we're always on the go, go,
yes,
go. Well, even living in Northern
exactly.
America
Exactly, right? The
in general.
Western culture,
Yes.
right? That sense of urgency. And
Hmm.
so to answer your question, some of the benefits, there's a host of benefits, right? One, you're really able to reduce your stress. There's physical benefits, right? When it comes to improving like immunity, right?
Hmm.
Improving your ability to focus and pay attention, your concentration, right?
Hmm.
And being able to really decrease an activated nervous system. Right? So when we think about moving through our world, even when we think about emotionally, sometimes something can happen and we like react, right?
Hmm.
And so practicing something like mindfulness gives us an opportunity, it gives us some space to actually be able to respond to something, right?
Hmm.
Right. So it kind of slows it down for us, allows us to decrease anxiety, right? Improve all of those things. So the list goes on and
It
on.
goes on.
And there's
Yeah.
been so much research, right? We're also looking at benefits in the brain, right? So seeing
Mm.
how that maps out and those that maybe do 6 to 12 weeks of mindfulness training, how it changes the physiology of their brain because of our neuroplasticity.
Wow, that's really amazing. Like just putting the science behind it, right? I feel like that's when if people are like, why would you do that? But I feel like it just a lot of people who don't believe and they see the science part of it, it really puts it together.
Yeah,
I know for myself,
I
I
did.
started reading this book with Joe Dispenza. And he combines the science with like healing and so forth. But hearing the science part of things is so interesting because I'm like, oh my God, this is why how our brain works and why it's so important to do this. So I love that. I love that, that aspect of it because like I said, like I had to be convinced.
Yes. And you're not alone, right? People are like mindful. Why do I need to do that?
Like, what does that do?
Exactly.
I love that. So, what are something else like because I know let's go into like self-care aspect of it because I know this is something
Mhm.
I personally have struggled with. And I
Yeah.
didn't realize I wasn't taking care of my body. Um,
Yeah.
physically and anything like where I would like be sluggish and just like not loving myself, like loving my body and really being, I guess,
Yes.
present in my body, in tune with my
Mhm.
body.
Yeah.
Um, what do you recommend someone who maybe doesn't have the awareness of it? Because I had to be pointed out that,
Mm.
about that
Yeah.
part of ourselves that we don't focus on as women.
Yes. Yes. So, you're mentioning like you realized for you, like I didn't even know that that was a thing,
Yeah, I
right?
didn't. I was like, what is this? Like, really?
Yeah. Right. So, something to think about and to consider, just to even start off, is taking a moment to reflect on how do I actually talk about internally and what do I say like about my body,
Mm,
right?
mhm,
And when I think about every day, whether you're getting up or you're getting ready for something, or maybe you're getting up out of bed, like what is that self talk that happens, right? Like when you look at yourself in a photo, what is the comment and the thought that follows, right? Is
right.
it like, oh my goodness, I look so fat, or I look
Mhm,
so short or tall, right? Is it, I'm comparing often to everybody else? Do I have that internal dialogue when I'm eating? Like, oh, you're such a
mhm,
this or you're such a that, right? Or that's terrible, right? what is that internal dialogue and self-talk? Bring your awareness to it, because oftentimes we don't realize how we actually talk about ourselves
Right.
internally, even if we're someone who's like, oh, I feel confident, but how do you really talk about yourself? How do you really
Mhm.
feel in your body, right? Do you feel confident? Do you feel empowered? Or do you feel like, oh, I feel lethargic and I don't have energy and I'm just whatever you judge yourself for?
Right. It's interesting you said that, like, when I'm like, oh, I'm confident. I think this is why the reason I hate that term, fake it until you make it.
Yes,
I know
yes,
I hear it so much, but I was like, it doesn't sit well with me because I'm
yeah,
like, that means you're just externally pretending you're this person, but internally
yeah.
you're like not even close to it.
Yes. And it takes energy to fake it till you make it, right?
Yes. So I'm just like, oh, when you said that, like, oh, I'm confident. Yeah, because I've always
Yeah,
felt like when I talk about this now, and I'm being so open about it, people are like,
yeah,
I would never imagine you having, feeling self-conscious about your body and who you are and
yeah,
so forth because you're always on camera or whatever. But
yeah.
I was like, yeah, but internally I had to realize no, because this was
Yes,
stopping me from showing up. I might show up here, but then I would disappear, or I would just like, maybe go like just didn't want to be doing anything with my business, or maybe step away from my family or friends.
yes,
It's those moments that I realize I don't like that anymore.
yes, yes.
I'm like, I want to feel good about myself no matter
Yeah.
what.
Yes, I love that. And I think that's so inspiring and so incredible. I'm so happy for you
Thank you, thank
and
you.
that
It's a
freedom, right?
process,
It
progress too.
exactly. It really is. And what we know and what we see is like it inspires others around us too.
Mhm.
When we make that decision, it impacts the generations under us and the generations above us, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I'm so excited for you.
Yeah, it's definitely like and I'm learning so much because a lot,
Yes.
I might have this awareness now, and I feel like that's the first step for me that was like, okay, awareness, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm learning so much because there's so much out there that I had no idea about. So, someone who is like having this awareness and like wants to, focus more on self-care, like what do you recommend them to start going toward, like doing for themselves, like baby steps, I feel.
Yeah. So one of the things that could be really helpful, getting started, yes, you have this awareness, I need to work on this, but
Mhm,
it's starting to really notice like what for me is what sensations come up for me, doing
mhm,
different things, right? What is positive or pleasurable for me? What is not? When do I feel like my best? Right? It's
mhm,
it's noticing these little aspects, right? It gives you something to kind of start with, right? Because if I'm thinking about how do I take care of myself, how do I feel more embodied, how do I do these things in my body, a part of it is, yes, raising our awareness, but then also paying attention to when do I actually like feel good? When do I feel most confident, right?
mhm. I love that you said that because it wasn't like a general, like, do this. It was more like you have to go back to within yourself and figure
Yeah.
out, okay, what is something that feels good about you, like that you do? Yeah, I
Yes.
love that you said that because yeah, there's no like one right way or wrong way. Because I feel like there's so many
Exactly.
like people, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. And it's like, what direction to go? But it all comes down to us, like what feels good to us.
Yes. Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
how do you want to feel? Do you want to feel like strong? Do you want to
Mhm.
feel like, when do you feel like, in other words, like, oh, I'm like really feeling myself, right?
Mhm.
Or I'm
Yeah,
in a
right,
vibe. Like, what does
right.
that look like? Right.
Right.
You'll see posts on social media like, oh, I felt good today.
Mhm.
And so what is that for you? Right. So
I
that
love
we
that
can
you
help reconnect it.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I just interviewed actually a stylist a couple of weeks ago. And the reason
Yeah.
I interviewed her is because it was just one of those smallest little tips that she was sharing of what type
Yeah.
of clothes to wear, not wear, but like how to make your body, based on your body type, like how you should wear your
Mm,
blouse or what type of jeans and so forth so you could feel more confident. And it's just so funny.
yeah.
Just that small little thing that I just followed made such a difference.
Yes.
And
Right?
I was like, okay, dressing up, putting on makeup, it makes me
It's like
feel
I'm feeling.
it makes me feel empowered, like there's
Yes.
nothing wrong with that.
I
You know?
love that.
Yeah, so it's just based on like what you feel good about. So I love that you said that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love
And
that.
it's so interesting that when we think about like what makes us feel good, right? I think about how like the world's definition of like beauty and what you should aspire for
Mhm.
and those standards, it's like, you know, it's like
Yeah.
you're winning or losing. You can't win or you can't lose, right? So
Mhm.
that's why it's so important to think about, okay, what is beautiful to you? What is confident to you?
Yeah.
Because everybody else can't define it for you.
I love that you said that because it's so true. And I feel like it's something that we all have to embrace because with the media, everything like this is beautiful. Like you have to strive for this look, for this
Yes.
body. And in reality, like not even twins look alike. Like,
Yeah.
no matter if
Exactly.
it's fraternal or not. Like
So
that's one of the
true.
biggest things and that I personally have to like figure out myself is because that is a self-conscious things I always had. Like I was always the
Yeah.
tallest person. I'm 5'10", and as a little girl, like I've always been so tall. Like alone that I always felt like an outsider and felt like, oh
Yes.
my God. And I feel like now at 37, like I have a daughter, she's 11. So I'm like, oh my God, I would hate for her to feel that way. Like how
Yeah.
can I help her embrace like her beauty, who she is? She doesn't have to look like everyone else around her.
Yes. Yeah. Such a great question. And I think it goes back to a couple things. One, in your role, and like because you're like, you're in her life, you're someone that she looks up to, you can model for her like
Mhm,
what it's like to really like appreciate and love your body so
mhm,
that she hears it, when you're like, you're doing this work and you're like, oh, I really love my smile today. I love the way my
mhm.
eyes sparkle when I wear this color, right?
Right.
And your daughter is able to hear that, right? They're able to internalize that as well. And so hearing the way that you talk to yourself
Mhm.
enables them to internalize that positive voice and appreciative voice for their own beauty as well.
Yeah, because
Mhm.
I know growing up, my mom was always in diets. She like would always
Mhm.
criticize her body, and just
Yeah.
alone with friends, sometimes I got to the point like, oh my God, like this is all we talk about, how our body looks, how can we change it? And it's just like, wow, like it's so ingrained in so many ways. I think the more I'm aware of this and like more educating myself in this, I never
Yeah.
realized how it's all over.
All over, right? Everywhere we look, right? Everywhere we look. And, in the beginning, you and I were talking about for a moment about like the lifespan and being empowered on the lifespan.
Hmm.
When I'm working with older women, you know,
Hmm.
particularly those that have attributed a lot of their value and worth to their physical body, right?
Hmm.
It can be such a challenge to go through the aging process, right? And really redefine who am I and what's my value outside of how I am physically or how I think I should be physically, right? And so
Wow.
it's not
Yeah.
just in our younger years, but
Mm.
also in our midlife and older years. It's like how do I still have value even if I look different than I did when I was in my 20s, right? And
Hmm.
so it's not just one aspect, but it's all these different parts of the lifespan.
Yeah, and it's interesting you said that because the more conversations I have, the more interviews I do with podcasts, it always comes down to your worthiness, like how worthy you feel of yourself. Because I never realized that our value was always connected to our looks as a
Yes.
women. Like I never realized that. I was like,
Yes.
oh my God, like unless, someone tells me I'm beautiful or considers me beautiful, that means, I'm worthy. If not, oh my God, I'm not at those standards.
Yes, exactly. Right. And it's something we don't even realize or even think about.
I feel like we've been brainwashed,
Oh
you know?
man. it can pretty much feel like that and be like that, right? It's like, so
Yes.
that's a big thing you can do too, is how do I really critically assess the messages I receive and like what the truth in that is, right? And
Mm,
rejecting that mentality.
right. Like, I know it's like such a hard question to ask, but like, how do you start that? Like, because this is such a huge thing to unravel, right? And
Mhm.
really work on. It's like, how can I feel worthy of myself without, I guess, all these external sides? Because I feel like we feel worthy if someone compliments us. Like, it's always some external thing where we feel validated. Like, okay, we're good. But I feel like how can we feel worthy just knowing who we are? Like I am worthy. I don't need anyone else to validate that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. And I'd say to start with recognizing and appreciating the whole you, right?
Mhm.
When we look at like what we really love or appreciate, sometimes we can really focus on like physical aspects, which is nothing
Mhm.
wrong with like really loving aspects of your physical self, right? And
Mhm.
it's the body you're born in, right? And so, but what else, right? What is it connected to? What does it represent, right? What are the aspects of your character that are inner,
Mhm.
your inner like value? Recognize that when you're looking in the mirror, right? Maybe for example, you're like, I really, really appreciate like my arms. And
Mhm.
I do because they have held and hugged all the people that are most important to me in my life, right?
Mhm.
It's like going beyond the surface to really look at like, who am I, right? And what is most valuable about me besides like what I do or what I look like.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're so right because it is the first thing like, okay, like the first I think the first thing people think about is like, oh, how does my body look? Because this is how it's supposed
Mm,
to look. But we never ask like what our body actually does really for us. You know, our
yes.
arms, our legs, everything. Like we really, I know personally myself, I know I haven't where I don't appreciate them until it's gone, right? Like I'm like
Yes.
I hate to say it, but a lot of us when something happens part of our body, then we're like, oh my God, I never really appreciated it.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's never too late to start, right?
No, I'm glad you mentioned that because I feel like the older we get, we always feel like, oh, it's too late now. You know? I know people here like, "Oh, you're just 37." I'm like, "I get it," but in today's society, when women hit like 30,
Yes.
you have to have supposedly certain thing in life, right?
Hmm.
And it has to look this certain way. If not, I know I have. It's like I would beat myself up. It's like, "Oh my God, I'm not married. I don't have this, this and that."
Uh-huh.
So, like, what do you tell women that are in that moment, like 30, 40, 50, so forth? Like, it's never too late to work on yourself.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Yes. We get that message, right? But
Mhm,
our season and our path is throughout each decade, right?
mhm,
What is meant for us and our path is going to look different for every person. And so every decade, every year is an opportunity. Not every year, every day is an opportunity to
mhm,
really create and live the life that you want, right? Because it's never too late. You have so much life to live no matter what decade you're in. And everybody's path is different. And when we focus on what's for us and what is within our hearts and what we're wanting, right, moving forward, it really helps us shift that focus from what people are doing to my left and to my right, right? I
mhm,
think about it kind of like a field of wildflowers, right? Like we're all so full of beauty, right? So different, so unique, so diverse, and we all bring a different aspect to the world. Right? But if I'm focused on how that flower looks over there and like when their season to bloom is, and you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
then or like, if the florist is gonna pick them, right?
You're
It's
right,
like
right.
it takes away from my ability to enjoy the sunshine as a flower and to really take in its rays and to enjoy the community that I'm in, right? And I'm saying that metaphorically, but essentially we can do that same thing, right? We're so focused on what's happening to the left or to the right, that we don't take the time to recognize that in this specific season, I can blossom something that I want to blossom, right?
Mhm.
What is the season of my life going to look like? And so it's a reframe of the mind and a mindset shift.
Yeah, definitely. And you're so right. Like, I feel like, and I know I'm so guilty of this. Like, I would always compare myself to others, especially at age. Like, I always had this thing
Mhm.
with age. Like, at this age, I'm going to have this. At this age, I'm going to have
Uh-huh.
that. And then,
Yeah,
like,
a lot of
have a,
us do that.
and you have
Yes.
a wake up call. It's like, I'm not there. So, like, you get to this depression mode of, like, oh my God, I'm a
Yeah.
failure, or, I'm unworthy. This is why I don't have this, and so forth. So, we have this comparison.
Yeah.
And I feel like social media does that so well.
Oh
Oh
man.
my,
Yes.
I
That's a
do.
big one.
I'm on social media all the time because of my business, and I get it,
Yeah.
but I feel like there is negative sides of social media, where there is this comparison so
Yes.
much because, of course, people are only going to post like the beautiful side of things of life.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
That we forget to be like, they're human beings. And I feel like that's a big part that I have to, and I'm still working on it. I have to catch myself. I'm comparing myself again.
Yes. Yes. And having that awareness is such a key piece, right?
Mhm.
And realizing what am I consuming, and having and looking at it with like a critical eye, right? The
Mhm.
critical eye being, this isn't the reality all the time for everyone,
Mhm.
right? There's so many things that people struggle with that we don't know about. And what they're dealing with and what I'm dealing with, it could be so different. So maybe they're doing something that you want to do, but it doesn't mean that you'll never be able to do that,
Right.
right?
Right. It might look different. And that's
Yes.
okay. And that's totally okay. Yeah, that's something I definitely have to I'm still learning to like release that part of myself because I feel like it's an
Yeah.
ongoing thing. Like,
It
and
is.
it is. And that's another thing that I've had these aha moments is like, okay, there's no this I had this thing of like perfection. It had
Mm,
to be perfect. Like,
yeah.
you have to have this perfect life. Like in order to have this success, I guess you want to call it, in life and
Yeah.
business, you had no problems.
Oh man. Right? That's like one of the biggest solutions.
Yes, it's just like, oh well, I'm not perfect yet, like I'm
Yeah.
still dealing with this. And now I'm realizing life is like ebb and flow, like and
Yes. Mountains and valleys.
mhm.
Mountains and valleys. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's like a constant thing, and I know you're a psychologist, and I feel like it's so important because getting help is going to that. Because as women, we feel like, oh, we can do it all. Like we can't, and I always think of my mom because my mom has this thing where she listens to this. She's gonna be so mad I'm giving her as an example, but I always be like, why do you do this to yourself? Every time she feels sick or anything
Mhm.
like that, she 10 times works like cleaning the house or doing all these big projects when she feels
Yes.
her weakest, right? And she doesn't ask for help, right? Because she
Yeah.
wants to prove something to herself. It's mainly herself, right? So women do this all the time, right? It's just like we don't ask for help.
Mhm.
We were
Mhm.
conditioned that we should handle everything. We should take care of everyone.
Have it all together.
Have it all together. Like,
Mhm.
what can someone do? Get to that point. I guess it's not like a right or wrong way to go about it, but like, how can you encourage someone to actually get help?
Yeah. Yeah. If it's a friend or somebody that you see, right? Like, okay, I know that this person is struggling. I know that they could benefit from help, or even for yourself, right?
Mhm.
Like, okay, I'm struggling. I need help. I can't do this alone. It's reminding yourself that, and throughout our lives, there's seasons of giving and receiving, right?
Mm.
And maybe this is a time for you where you allow yourself to receive, right? And reminding yourself that throughout our lives, there's always a time that we need support, no matter who you are, where you come from. No one goes through the journey alone. And so reminding yourself, maybe this is my season. Right? And if you're feeling fearful or afraid, bring a friend with you. right?
Mhm.
Say you have to make that phone call and you feel like, I don't know what to say. Like maybe you can call with your friend and they
Mhm.
could support you, even if they're not saying anything.
It's so
Right?
true you said that you don't know what to say because when I started this healing journey of mine,
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was needed to heal or like I didn't even know it was healing I needed.
Yeah. Right? Recognizing it is such a thing.
Recognize it because I feel like I mean I started this probably 7 years ago, and mental health and wellness wasn't like this popular thing that now I'm so glad everybody's talking about.
Yes, we've come a long
We've
way.
come a long way. So I know this conversation is not new, but I feel like it has to be repeated over and over just as much as we have to remind ourselves.
Oh, 100%. Especially the stigma that still exists, right?
Yes.
Even though we talk about getting support, getting help, right? There's still
Mhm.
so much stigma about it, whether it's through therapy, right? The
Mhm.
stigma got getting mental health support, or even asking others for help, right?
Yeah.
I work with also with a lot of mothers, and sometimes we talk about like who's in their support system
Mhm.
and how can they get support. And sometimes there can be a lot of shame about needing to ask because they're like, well, how did my mother do it and my grandmother? Or maybe the
Mhm.
mother or grandmother or auntie said, well, I did that, and I had all of this and I did that. So you're going to have to just
Yes.
suck it up and keep moving. Right. And
Yes.
so then there can be this internalized shame of like, oh, like I'm not handling it. There's something wrong with me. I'm flawed. Right. I'm not a good enough mom.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I definitely have felt that, and I always used to hear all the times like, well, you're not the only one. You're not the only one that goes through that,
mhm.
which is some comfort, but at the same time, you feel like, oh man, I'm not handling this well.
Exactly, exactly. You're like, what am I not doing?
What am I not doing right to handle this,
Right?
I love that you said that. And also what caught my attention, you're like receiving. Receiving. It is
Yeah.
the hardest thing ever receiving. I never realized that personally myself, I didn't know how to receive. Not even a
Yes.
compliment.
Yes. Yes. You bounce it back or,
Bounce it back.
reject it some way.
Yes. Yes. And I was like, oh my God, I do not know how to receive. And I like how you said that because you bounce it back. That was me. Like, oh, you
Mhm.
look so pretty. Oh, you do too. Like it's not like you don't even
Yes.
really allow yourself to take it in.
Yes, right? And then what changes when you do, right? Like just notice how that feels in your
Mhm.
body when you
Right.
allow yourself to receive, right?
Mm.
Whether it's a compliment, whether it's like support from another person in your family or, a therapist or someone else in your life. Like, what does it feel like to receive?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big
Mhm.
advocate of getting support and I'm not against like family or friends, but I feel like getting an outside perspective, someone who doesn't know you, is
Mhm.
so much more powerful. And I'm saying that by experience.
Yes, yes,
Because a
right?
lot of times our family has their own issues, their own struggles that they're dealing with
Yes.
and like their own beliefs too.
Yes, yes. And their perspective may be biased,
Mhm.
right? Because they're in your life, they know you. And having a third party that's objective, that is able to be in that like professional relationship can be very, very powerful and healing for many people. And I know I'm biased, but I recommend it. I think everybody should have a therapist, right?
I agree with
Everybody,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you because I mean, we can't do this alone, no matter the stigmas, that you mentioned. Let's talk about the stigmas a little bit. Like, what are the top three stigmas that you always hear about mental health and wellness and all this stuff?
Yeah, a big one, that I'm weak or I'm not strong enough,
Mhm.
right? That's a big one. Um, I should be able to handle it, and my family's business, I need to keep that within the family and not share
Oh,
that.
yes, I could relate to that one. I mean, actually, I could relate to
Right.
all three, but that one really hit home because I would hear over and over, like, your personal problems is your own business. Like, no one needs to hear
Yes.
that.
Yes. And for those that struggle with perfectionism, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, it means I'm not perfect, right? It
Mm-hmm.
means I'm not good enough.
Like there's
When
something
in
wrong with
actual,
me.
yes, when in actuality, it takes so much strength um, to seek support because none of us are perfect, like none, like we're human. And there's like a lot of beauty in that,
Mm-hmm.
accepting one's humanity and acknowledging that, each person, their experience, like it's okay to be like a beautiful mess, right? Like
Yeah.
we're human, we're messy, right? We're
Mhm.
growing, which is why that hashtag progress over perfection is so,
Yes.
growing and popular because it's real.
It's real. I feel like people are just like got tired of like this. I guess I'm gonna say fakeness that we were all doing, you know,
Yes.
for so long because
Yeah.
that's how we were raised to be. Like, don't show any flaws, don't say you're weak or anything like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
You
Or
know,
bring shame to your family.
shame to your family. Yeah, I feel like family has a lot that we have to like how do you say this, like unravel all these beliefs that we created in our family,
Mhm.
because it's just passed
Yeah.
down, from generation to generation. And I'm sure you hear that a
Exactly.
lot in your sessions.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And we all have our own beginnings, our own, experiences in our family, our own attachment experiences, right? We all have our own traumas and things that shape our view and way of the world, and not just our way of the world, but also ourselves, right?
Mm,
And so, just like it took a lifetime for us to establish these beliefs, right?
yeah.
Give ourselves compassion that it takes time to shift our mindset. It takes time to think differently, to do differently. Our behavior doesn't always match what we want, right? And
Mm,
so give yourself some compassion for all of us, right?
yeah,
Something
definitely.
I have to remember, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's one of the things. I'm always impatient. You're like, I've been working on this.
Mm,
Why is this still triggering me?
yeah. Yes, yes. Which means it's healing, right? We're
Instantly,
healing.
yeah,
It's a
yes.
process.
So definitely patience is definitely one of them. I had another one, but it just kind of went away. Maybe I wasn't meant to mention it. But yes, patience is definitely one of them. It's so important, and having compassion for yourself, like that's a new thing for me. Having compassion for myself, like I didn't realize how mean I could be to myself.
Yeah. We do it automatically sometimes,
It's
right?
automatic. It could be just the smallest little thing, like you tell yourself just words,
Hmm.
that you could be so mean to yourself. I think that's what I was going to mention about how one thing that I realized that when I was dealing with a lot of like beliefs that I like learned as a child and so forth from family, I always thought my issues weren't, not one saying as important, but not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that was one of the biggest things because I felt like trauma was like trauma, like, someone, was
Yeah.
sexually abused as a child or something like that. So I felt like
Yeah.
my things weren't a big deal,
Hmm.
you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And I wanted to mention that because in case someone else is listening, they're like, well, my problems are not a big deal. Like I could do it myself, but that's what I used to think,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And
And that's
this
not uncommon. Yeah.
Yeah, like the smallest thing that I was like, "Oh my god, that made me believe that I was this." Like it's
Hmm.
things that as a child that we see it differently as an adult now, but didn't
Yeah.
realize how much that small little thing that I thought it wasn't a big deal, like shaped my adulthood.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we each have different memories, experiences that do shape the way that we view ourselves and others.
Yeah.
And so when we're in these situations that come up or show up for ourselves, that past, child, right? Our child self,
Mhm.
our inner child or versions can bring different beliefs based on what we've experienced, right?
Mhm.
Which is why it can be helpful to have that support to really view our perspective, right? Are there any like blind spots? Are we being, you know, harmful to ourselves or unhelpful and how we talk to
Mhm.
ourselves. And yeah, it's a process. Right?
It really is.
100%.
Yeah, it's not like one solution. I feel like it's unravels. I feel like once I started this, it was like one thing after another started unraveling more and more.
Yes, yes. You're like, oh, this, I want to work on this too.
Yes, it was
And
like so
this.
much that even things that I didn't realize would come up.
Yeah. Yes. We're so complex, right? As
Oh,
human beings.
definitely.
And we bring so much to our adult lives, also like to our world, right? We're so
Mhm.
complex. And
Yeah.
so the more we understand and have compassion for where we are and our common humanity, but then
Mhm.
also like know that we have power, power to reclaim our own, what we want, our own dreams and how we
Mhm.
want to be different and break cycles, right? We have that
Mhm.
power. It's not just what's happened to me. At some point, we have that point where we get to make that decision of like, how do I want to live? And what cycles do I want to break, right? Regardless of what I've experienced.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing I've been learning is like we are so powerful. Like sometimes we are the only ones holding ourselves back.
Mm, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Not believing that it's possible,
Not
not
believe
believing that we can, right? In
Mhm.
whatever form that healing is, just thinking it's not possible. And so I love what you've created and just holding that hope, to all your listeners that might feel like, oh, like you said, it's too late for me or I have so much. Oh, that's great for them. But what about for me? I had all this stuff, right?
Definitely. I feel like that's a big thing because I used to think like that too. Well, it's easy
Mhm.
for them because they have all of this. They have more money or,
Yeah,
I feel like that's one of the biggest thing about self-care too. They feel like it has to be expensive. It's too expensive,
exactly. This is a big myth. A big
right?
myth.
Big myth. So someone who
Yes.
believes that, like, what would you tell them when it's like that's I feel like it's an excuse, right? But it's still valid, where they say like, "Oh, well, it's too much money for me to continuously do this every month." Or like,
Oh, yes. Yeah. I would say self-care, it doesn't have to cost money at all,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
The things that you regularly do that you enjoy, those simple pleasures, whether it's like having a cup of tea in the morning or the evening, or if it's going for a walk or just being in nature, for example, there's a lot of things you can do that you don't have to pay anything.
mhm.
Self care is number one, making that time to do things that you enjoy, but also what restores you. Right. I was having a conversation the other day about how this what is self-care, right? Like what is
Yeah.
doing nothing look like?
Mhm,
What does that look like for me? And you don't have to go on that vacation or go to like the spa for hours and hours. Like
mhm,
just slowing things down for yourself, maybe doing things that restore you. Because for somebody, it might be slowing things down. For
mhm,
somebody else, restoring is like doing things that are active, right? It's
mhm,
whatever restores you, where you feel like you can work and live from a place of like having your cup full versus being depleted and exhausted can be really
mhm.
helpful. So start small,
Start
right?
small. Yeah.
Simple ways.
Yeah, 'cause I feel like we have again another stigma about self-care too. Is like it has to cost money, or people who show it because they're taking trips, they're you mentioned the spa or all this stuff, but it especially I feel like someone who's brand new to self-care, just figuring out what they like to do at home that calms them down. I feel that's
Yes.
where I started because I was just like, well, what is self-care? Because I didn't grow up seeing my mom taking care of herself,
Yeah. Yeah.
even with the smallest thing, the skincare.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh my god, I don't have a good skincare." Like, I never saw my mom taking care of her skin. Like,
Hmm.
so it's just learning those little things that you can do for yourself.
Yes. Yes. Because we spend so much time, right, caring for others. But
Mhm.
it could even be as simple as allowing yourself to like eat like a meal or drink water or a snack, like
Mhm.
instead of just rushing, right? Or going. It's like, how can I nourish my body is another form of self-care.
Right.
Right? Resting when tired. If I'm tired, how can I rest, right? Do I need to cancel that commitment I have? Do I need to
Right, right.
consider doing something else instead so that I could have
Mhm.
time to like rest, even though I don't want to disappoint others, right?
Right. Yeah, I think there's so many factors that you mentioned that won't disappoint others because we think of others, we're like a lot of the time people pleasers, people pleasing is such a big thing. Like I'm,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I'm exhausted, but I have to do this. Like I don't want to disappoint them. It's so much that, we have to learn and step back and focus on what we need.
Yes. Yes. And when we do that, right, it
Mhm.
allows us to show up more in the ways that we want to, right?
Mhm.
Versus coming from like a place of like depletion.
Yes.
Because I can go, but am I really going to really be able to be present if I'm like falling asleep,
Mhm.
right?
Right, yeah,
Um,
because sometimes we're like, you reach your goal, whatever that is, but you're not
yeah.
even enjoying it. I
Yes.
think that has happened to me where it's just like I'm go, 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 or just not focusing on my wellness, my health, or anything. I get there. I know I can get there, but I'm not
Hmm.
even enjoying it.
Oh, yeah. And we talk about these messages, right? Like that we
Mhm.
get. One of them is like, okay, I'm going to be happy when I get that thing,
I'm guilty,
right?
so guilty
Right.
of that.
All of us are, right?
Mhm.
And the reality is that no, you can be happy, you can have higher levels of well-being. You can live more from a flourishing mindset and embodiment, even if you don't have that thing, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so establishing some of those practices like a gratitude practice, a spiritual practice can be really helpful too as a form of self-care for some.
Yeah, I love that you said that because that's what I love about your wellness center because it combines spiritual side too, which is I don't know, maybe that's just my understanding. Like psychologists only stick to the science part of things and don't mix sometimes the
Mm,
spiritual side of things. Maybe that's just
mhm.
me thinking that. That was just a belief I had. But I love
Yeah, some ascribe to that. Yeah.
right? So I love that you combine that in your wellness center. You provide that as well.
Yeah, we're passionate about like supporting the whole woman, right?
Mm,
There's so many different aspects to you, right?
mm.
So yeah, something that we love just to be able to support someone holistically.
Yeah, that's so important. I'm a true believer holistic side too. That can do so much for us. There's so many layers. There's no right or wrong way to take care for yourself.
Exactly. Personalized and
Yes,
never too late.
it's never too late. So I love that. Well, thank you so much, Janelle. This was amazing. I loved our conversation and I learned a lot.
You're so welcome. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. And just, I love this conversation. I'm so glad that we met and I appreciate just you for being you and all the amazing things that you're doing as well. So thank you for
Thank
having
you
me.
so much. I appreciate it. I can't believe it's been a year since we met.
I know.
It's I didn't
Oh
even this
man.
podcast wasn't even in my mind when we met.
Talk about evolution, right? We never
Right.
know the path.
We never know the path where we're going.
Never know.
So I appreciate your time and I hopefully we could do this again because I really enjoyed it.
Same here. Take
All
good
right.
care,
You
okay?
too.